All right. Good Thursday morning. People of
Yeah.
Earth, how are you? Hello, Pumirele.
Hello, Gareth.
What's happening? Hmm.
I just need to understand from you, please.
Yeah,
Does Simpiwe
sure.
treat everyone this way, or is it just me? So it's not
What do you
enough
mean?
for her that I am a short person. She also then today had like a sunken chair, basically for me. All you could see it was the top of my head. Like, what is going on? Why is Simpiwe trying to sabotage me in this manner?
No, I'll tell you what Simpiwe is she's absolutely lovely to all of our guests. In fact, all of them say to me, "Oh, that Simpiwe who works with you is wonderful." And I say, "Yeah, she is. It's only you, Pums. It's just you."
So it's just me.
Mm.
She's
Yeah.
I don't know what I've done to her. I really
She
don't know
wants
what I've done to her.
she wants you to look like a dwarf. Obviously, that's her game.
It was did you see the opening? Did you see the opening ceremony of the World Cup?
No, and I haven't watched one game yet. I said I was going to watch yesterday, but I was so busy working, I didn't even have a chance. And then in the evening, I had load shedding, so I couldn't watch any of that. So I have not seen a single match of the World Cup so far, not one. So I don't know if
Not,
it's even going to happen for me. I'm not going to sit here and moan about it every week or every day,
but
even.
we're gonna have a no
So
no
far,
no. But
so far I
gonna
felt guilty, and I'm not going to.
it's gonna get better because it's
I hope
December.
so.
Just now, around the corner, it's December, boss. And in December, all sorts of rules go out of the way. I actually was thinking about this, two things about the World Cup. It's
Yeah.
gonna it's gonna be all right. We're gonna be fine because we're gonna be like home or out at drinking places, and there's gonna be World Cup matches, and we're gonna be in our own establishments. So we're not going to have like the restrictions that people that are actually at the World Cup are going to have, right? So we're gonna be. What did your old finance minister Gigaba tell you? It's gonna be right.
Ah, please, I'm not gonna be pulling on him for inspiration, trust me.
It's gonna
I
be
don't know.
right.
Yeah, I hope so. I haven't seen any of it
And it's
yet.
gonna be those games. So not it's gonna be those games. It's gonna be the ones in the second session, right? So
All right.
all the all the weaker teams are gonna have been like weeded out. And then
Like
it's gonna
top
be fire.
16,
It's
quarterfinals,
gonna be
semifinal.
fire.
All right, okay. Yeah, maybe that'll change the tune that I've been whistling, but so far I haven't seen a single one. I haven't even felt motivated to switch on a TV. I mean, that's how I feel most of the year. So I used to be one of those people. No, I used to be one of those people who, I was proud of the fact that I was a big World Cup fan. That was something I didn't miss. I can't even claim that anymore now. So, lovely Lady Lee agrees. We're going to be all right. That's what she says, just like you do, Pums. Netherlands all
Yeah,
the way for the win, says Donna. Um, Sanele says,
really.
yeah. Richard
They
Bunda says,
played Senegal, their
when
opening
teams
match, right?
like Japan beat Germany, I don't want to know, Pums. So, yeah. Uh, We will have to see. We will, I have to say, so far, I'm still there's still too much going on for me to be able to say, "Oh, I'm not going to be able to do this thing because there's a World Cup football match on." Maybe that will start happening. That's what I certainly hope. Anyway, how have you been? I hear you've been really, really busy. You spent the last 2 days like facilitating a
I
workshop.
was workshops. I was out in Mayor Tanya Campbell's neck of the woods
Ekurhuleni.
for the past Ekurhuleni for the
Mm.
past couple of days. So there are so many so amazing people in this country who
Tell
are
me.
invested in trying to like make it what it can be. And
That
that's
sounds good.
exciting for me. It's
Inspire.
exciting for me. It really, really was. It was an incredible 2 days with a whole lot of young creatives just working through how to uplift and excite and re-engage young people about South Africa and what they can do, what we can do, what we all can do to make South Africa more than what it is right now. Away
Would
from
you
the people who think they own this country. They don't own this country, we do.
would you use the term "make South Africa great again"?
Never,
All right,
never.
so inspire me and everyone else who's listening this morning. Tell me what you see.
But here's the downside, right? So this is the downside of it all, is when you have that kind of like adrenaline rush and absolute high.
Mhm.
Yesterday, I crashed. Last night, I got home and I absolutely crashed. I couldn't even read my running orders. I woke up early this morning to try and read my running orders, see who our guest is, what the news is about, catch
Mhm.
up,
Yeah.
try and catch up. It's hectic, but it's
All right, so you had this
exciting.
two-day workshop. You met young people who are inspiring and all of that stuff. What did you see in them that you think the rest of us should know about? Why are they, why are you like hopeful
They
after this stuff?
you know what? They absolutely understand that this country belongs to us and not to
Mhm.
people who would purport it belongs to them. This country doesn't belong to the politicians who want to tell us how to be and what to do. This country belongs to us, and the politicians work for us.
Mhm.
And when young people understand that, because we talk about it, right? We talk about voting, we talk about young people showing up to vote or not showing up to vote, and who who participates in all of these pardon me, who participates and who puts their hand up to say they want to be the people who can help. And most young people kind of go, yeah, you people fucked it up and I'm just going to sit on the side. I don't care, you guys go over there and do your own thing. But there are young people who are absolutely engaged and committed to being part of the solution and not letting. Have you seen the pictures of how old the people are that are putting their hands up to say they can fix things?
Mm-mm.
Very old people.
Oh, really?
Yeah, well, we're gonna. What are you talking about? We just look at the picture of who is
Very
vying for
old.
the position of the top six of the ANC. I think
Very
collect
old.
1,000 years old.
Very old people.
And collectively, they're about 1,000 years old.
uh,
In a country that's predominantly young, even you and I are old people.
mhm.
There are more people who are much younger than us who have more energy. And because that's what you need, right? You need people with energy to solve the problems. You need people with ideas. You need people with knowledge and learning behind them and who want more than anything, who want to see everybody prosper, not just themselves.
Well, Basitsana's got two questions here for you this morning. The first thing, what did those kids say about voting? And second of all, the fact that Zweli Mkhize is even being considered to be ANC president is fucking disgusting. So I think she wants to comment on both those things. Do you want to attack either of them
That
first?
Listen, that second part. So this is another way in which Simpiwe has disempowered me here in the studio today. I don't get to see the comments.
Oh, surely you can see them. I'll put them up for you on the screen and you'll see them.
So I think the second one is a comment. It's not a question. It's a comment, and I agree with you. Basizana,
Hmm.
I absolutely agree with you that this is a man who, at the height of what at the time was being called a deadly pandemic that changed everybody's lives, and there was money put aside to help
Yeah.
people, and he helped himself to that money, him and his kids. I still can't believe that there is a picture of his son with the little, like, is it a sheep or a goat with the Louis Vuitton scarf? Like, what the
Oh, for
hell?
God's sake. Yeah. I mean, that is just, I mean, that's like spitting in the faces of people, especially poor people in this country.
And this
Um,
guy has the gall. This guy has the gall to stand up and say, yeah, I could be the person that runs this whole shebang. I could be the person who runs this whole shebang.
yeah, but they know this is the land of no consequence. Can I tell you what I thought of yesterday? And this is probably going to upset lots of people, which is why I know it's a great idea. Because when when people get emotional, then you've hit on something that probably should be done. So it'll never happen, and I can discuss it because it's purely theoretical and it's my idea. I'm happy to take credit for it. Everybody talks about, we need a universal franchise and everyone should vote and all of that stuff. Well, nothing new in this part of it. I say absolutely not. I actually think we should restrict voting, to the people who can pass a test. And here's the test: you go into the voting booth for the municipal and local, and for the national and provincial elections. And there's a page. Everybody who goes in gets a page. There are maybe one of 40 different tests that could come up at any. So in other words, there's no way to cheat the system. I mean, provided that you have at least free and fair elections, they're run by the IEC, all that kind of thing. So they can do the ballots at the same time. There are these 40 potential question sheets. You don't know which one you could get, but you're going to get one of 40 different sheets. There might even be repeat questions on some of them, but they're questions about government and about how the country works and how things function, but not complicated questions. I promise you. Things like, for example, do you know what the difference is between the legislature, executive, and judiciary? Do you understand what the Constitution is? And I'm not talking about like long answers. We can make a multiple choice. So you can say, the body which decides to make laws is called the A, legislature; B, executive; C, judiciary. The supreme law of the
Can we
land is
start? Okay, so
called the A,
can we
Constitution.
start this test? Can the first people that take this test be the people who want to be?
To stand for office.
Yeah,
Yes,
let's start there.
yes, absolutely.
Then we can
But
fight about if everybody else should take that, because there is definitely a need to have in our in all spaces, in civil service
mhm,
and in political office, a clear understanding of what is expected of you.
yeah, as a
One of the
citizen,
things that we spoke about.
and as a politician. I mean, we're talking like 10 questions, Pums. This does not have to be rocket science, but I can promise you something. These 10 simple questions like, South Africa is an A, autocracy or kingdom or whatever; B, representative democracy; or C, majority mob rule. And you just get people to choose. And if you get below
See,
5 out of 10, let's say if you get anything over 5 out of 10, you can vote and your vote counts. If you get below 5 out of 10, then someone comes to you from the IEC and they say, thank you so much for coming and lining up with everyone else today, but I'm terribly sorry you didn't pass the basic citizen test, and therefore we're not going to count your vote. And they take your vote in front of you and they tear it up and they throw it in another bin.
so that raises a whole lot of other things, right? It also then says somewhere along the line of being a citizen, there must be some kind of citizen education program, right? There must be some kind of coming through school, through high school, through, some kind of
Yeah,
education that gives people the basics, that gives people those basics. If you want to ask
absolutely.
people
Yeah,
those
civics,
questions, you have
basic
to
civics.
take them through it.
These are things like, in South Africa, um, it is acceptable to discriminate against people based on sexuality, and people get to say A yes, B no. And I just think what you'll do is, first of all, you'll make voting a little bit harder because people will actually have to apply their mind instead of just going in there and like a robot voting for a party. And very often that is the only criterion that we expect from people. And it's a pathetic one. It's why we're stuck with such average people in office. But just make it a little bit more thoughtful and And again, this is not an intelligence test, and it's not a literacy test. It's got to be one of those things that's straightforward enough. The national anthem is boom, boom, boom. Things that make you that you think about what it is to be South African when you're in that voting booth. I don't think it's too much to ask people. I mean,
I would love to see the education include those things. I would love to
absolutely.
see us
No. This has
include
got to be.
those things in how
This
we
has got to,
raise South Africans.
and it's got to be primary school level stuff. Is like, who is responsible for maintaining your neighborhood? Is it A, the president, B, your local ward councillor, C, the majority
You.
party, or C, you? Yeah. And then, well, I mean, listen, that's part of it, right? So don't confuse people in the answers. It's got to be this has got to be very, very simple, because otherwise we're going to have big fights about people discriminating on the basis of X, Y, and Z. But you need to be taught this stuff at primary school. Simple, low-level primary school. A democracy is, because people don't know the answers to these questions. People have never actually explored the basic questions. And you think about what this country has sacrificed, because we now take for granted, like every kind of human being that's ever come before us. We never sit there and go, shit, we're lucky we've come so far. Look at all the progress we've made. Look at all the things that have happened, that we live in this free society that we take for granted, a free press, that kind of thing. No, we go, well, we still don't have X, Y, and Z. And in this country, we have reason to moan. We don't even have electricity and running water in parts of it. So we have reasons to complain. But if you give people this basic questionnaire, and it might result, I mean, this is the scary thing, it might actually result in like 50% of people just immediately being counted out. It might result in those 50% of people who go home from the polls and go, that's fucking ridiculous and outrageous. I should be included. Why wasn't it? But it will result in the 50% who answered that questionnaire right actually having a stake in what happens, because they understand what they voted for. Judges are independent people who interpret the law, interpret and apply the law. Or judges are evil people in courts who are bribed by politicians. Like basic things to make people understand. Am I being ridiculous? It's a qualified franchise, but it's not based on discrimination. It's not based on how much access you have to X, Y, or Z. This is like something which tests your ability to be a good citizen, your ability to apply a basic understanding of how this country is meant to work, so that when you vote, you don't just vote for whoever you've seen on a poster, which is it's like so basic and fundamental that actually it's a little bit insulting. This person on a poster, match the face, match the political party colors, match the political party's acronym. It's like, it's so basic. I think this is just going to take it up a little bit more, so that people, just like we want more from our politicians, we expect service delivery, and we expect the country to work in a certain way, and we expect so much from our leaders, but we expect nothing of the citizens. And I always say, you get what you deserve in voting. Well, maybe we should aspire to a little bit more from the electorate, not just from the leaders. Here are 10 questions. How hard could it be to answer 10 questions?
So I'm just thinking that one of the ways to start, and it's so what you're raising is a couple of interesting things for me, is how do we get more people knowing about what the work of being a citizen is, and the work of government and councillors, and how do we get more? And there's lots of simple ways, right? PSAs are one of them. There used to be a time when we used to have lots of PSAs about lots of things, about health issues, about where have you suddenly gone? I can't hear you.
We used to have a state
you're back.
broadcaster that worked properly. We used to have newspapers that, government would take out PSAs instead of just advertising for jobs and tenders. So there's a responsibility here on the state to inform the people of how the state is meant to work. But that's just fallen by the wayside. That's not a priority.
But it would be cool if more people knew what should be expected. And then, because when you know what they should be doing, then you can call them out for not doing it, right?
Right.
When you
Right.
know what should
If you
be
don't know that,
happening.
if you don't know that stuff, how are you gonna? You're just gonna get upset because you're gonna see things aren't working, but you're not gonna be sure why. Here's another idea,
Or
even more.
who's responsible?
Oh, who's responsible?
Yo, are you
How about this?
are you having that day?
No,
More
this,
controversial.
yeah. What about this? You can earn the ability to vote more than once if you attend free classes, free lectures, free online or in-person stuff that is deployed across the country by the Department of Basic Education or Higher Education or whatever. But
No, that's
you
a
can
bad idea. More than once.
no, I'll explain why. Let's say you do a course on South African law or South African or the Constitution or representative democracy or a local government or whatever. But short courses, like it must be something you can do in one afternoon, where you learn, for example, how local municipalities are meant to work. I mean, this is boring as hell. But what you're going to do is you're going to get the people who are the most motivated to learn about local municipalities, to learn how service delivery works.
No. Or you're going to get the people who have the free time.
But so many people in this country have the free time, and we need to get those people to the polls, don't we? The unemployed, the people who've given up.
Yeah, but they're busy hustling to try and stay alive.
So
they're hustling for the next 20 rand to buy bread.
So let's say you get, for doing all these courses, you get one extra vote. So now instead of just voting once when you go into the poll, you have now a stamp or a sticker or something in your ID book that says this person gets to vote a second time because they've completed all of these courses in government, in civics, in understanding how South Africa's constitution works. And then you don't get like 5 or 10 votes, but you get this extra vote because you've now learned not just the 10 things in the questionnaire, which you still have to pass to get your first vote and your second, but if you pass the 10 questions and you've done these courses, now you're really an invested citizen and you get one extra vote. Extra motivation for people who really care about that shit. And an extra say because they've attended courses, they've made an effort. Don't you think? Free courses available everywhere, you think is a bad idea?
You know how when you start, you said, it's a good idea because it's going to make people emotional. It's not making me emotional, but it's making me hell of a nervous. And I'll tell you why. Because I'll tell you why I say that. Because it's very easy to become exclusionary like that. I agree that we need to get more of the citizenry aware of what their duties. We talk a lot about our rights and very seldom talk about the responsibilities that go with those rights. So that is definitely something that we need. And I agree with you that it needs to be done at an elementary level. People need to grow up knowing and understanding these things. But what makes me nervous is when you begin to move into spaces that can be manipulated around that, right? Okay. So when you offer an additional chance to say, if you can or will do this, it's easy to become exclusionary in that manner.
All right. Well, how about civic duty and service? So let's say you are, let's say you're a doctor and you have to do your Zuma years, as they call them, right? Now, surely that is time that you've spent working for the state, essentially, working, but not for the state as in for the government, but working for the people of this country. In other words, delivering a very useful service to people in parts of the country who benefit enormously from your knowledge and experience, and you're also training at the same time. But it's 2 years or a year, depending on who you talk to, because it could be a year of military service. It could be a year where you are going around the country picking up litter with a team of people on one Wednesday afternoon a week, or it could be, doing your 67 minutes every month or whatever. We must decide what the structure is for the civic service that you provide.
You know that I love the idea of a civic service. I think it would do all of us more good if in our earlier years we had the opportunity to do two things. One, to travel around our country and see our country and see
Mhm.
what we have. And also to give our time, to give our energy, and also to learn about each other
All
and
right.
to
So,
learn. Yeah, the idea of a civil service, I think for young people, I think would be amazing.
so,
I
so
love
instead of
that idea.
making it compulsory and making people resent it, and it's almost like a punishment, reward them for it by giving them an extra vote. No, I'm serious about this, because that is a reward that only a true citizen will appreciate. Someone who doesn't care about an extra vote because they don't care about the system, or they don't care about their own future, or they're not interested in who's going to represent them or to make themselves the representative. They're not going to care about that extra vote. It's not going to be the kind of reward they care about. But if you find someone who agrees to read to children, or to work in
Help
a
old
line,
people get their
help old
medication.
people help old people get their medication, help people in a rural area to reconnect their water. I mean, whatever it might be, civic service, something that you do that isn't directly beneficial to you, and you do it because you're just a helpful citizen anyway, and you get X number of points that you can accumulate in a year, and it counts for one extra vote. Maybe there's something else we build into that. Maybe the state puts you on some kind of, I don't know what the other rewards could be, but rather than making it compulsory and making it a punishment, we give you a reward for being a participant in the civil society that we need. And there are lots of people who are already doing this stuff who get no
Hmm.
reward for it, right? There are lots of good people who are doing this stuff every day, social workers and therapists and gogos in townships who are looking after other people's children during the day. And sometimes they don't get any kind of remuneration or contribution from anyone for it. They're just doing it because it's the right thing to do. People do it one day a year for Mandela Day, and then sometimes they forget, and well, it's, I don't feel, if you knew that there was something in it for you, there was something that you could gain that would make your vote count more, or that would make you feel like you were participating more in the democracy. Because it really bothers me that some complete ignoramus who has done nothing with their lives, who is a wastrel, who's drunk every day, who goes around threatening and beating up other people, gets to go and vote in the same election that you do, Phumi, and that I do. I find that deeply insulting, because as much as I'm into everybody should be given the same opportunity, and I really am, everyone should have the same opportunity in life. It doesn't make sense to me that that kind of a person, who is exactly the opposite of someone who is civic minded, who gives a shit, that person should have the same say as us. It doesn't make sense to me. The world is not all about like equality down to the bones, because you're pursuing something that's impossible to attain then. It's utopian. And by definition, utopian things just lead to enormous amounts of pain and anguish. So we've got to find a way of making it work where, by being a great, useful contributor to society, there's something in it for you. I don't know. I'm throwing these things around this morning because obviously
I,
I'm dreaming, but it's fine.
I
It
think
was,
I think before we go to the headlines, I think you should take comfort in the fact that that guy, the one who's drunk all the time, the one
mm,
who's just useless in society, is probably drunk on voting day too. So he's not
mm,
showing
yeah.
up.
Well, there's a lot
Take
of
comfort
dumb
in that.
people who still get to vote, and I'm not into eliminating their ability to vote. I just think that we all need to take voting a little bit more seriously, treat it with the respect that it deserves for the sacrifice of all those people who came before us. And furthermore, with the respect you deserve as a citizen when you go there to think about what you're actually voting for. Like, take more than standing in a queue and looking at a poster to make your decision. Fill in this 10-point questionnaire so you actually sit there and go, I wonder why it is that we have human rights in the Constitution. It never occurred to me before. Now, I'll just apply my mind a little more carefully to where I put that cross. Wouldn't be a bad thing. Anyway, I mean, this is all too much
I
for doing in the morning, maybe.
It's a Thursday morning. They're used to it. This is how Thursday mornings start. Good morning.
Sanella says if the pass rate's only 30%, surely we should be allowed to pay 30% tax. Let's not have double standards. Like, now maybe that's it. That's maybe something interesting. You get a tax rebate if you do civic service.
That's nice.
You'd see a
That's
lot of
a
people.
good idea.
Imagine you get a straight 2% off your tax rate if you can tick off, because SARS we know is efficient, right? It's the only government department that works. You build a system into SARS where people get a 1 or 2% rebate on their taxes if they do that civic service once, a month, once a week, whatever.
That's a nice incentive. That's a nice incentive. I like that one.
I would be helping old ladies across the road for that. I can promise you. 1 or 2%, because 1 or 2% of the money I've frankly earned that you don't deserve to just come and take from me before I even get it in my account. To get that back from you for doing things for society, I'm all up for that. That's a good idea. All right, so lots of good ideas coming in here. Why is being mentally prepared for a vote such an issue when everyone has to be mentally prepared for a car license? What's worse, running over a pedestrian or running over a country? I mean, that's correct, parallel parking. The electorate isn't the problem. The problem are the corrupt Muppets who are on the ballots, says Congo Chris. At some point, there was just lots of talk, including civic duties, at least as part of university. It didn't happen, though, did it? SARS is effective at collections aspect, not so much on the returns. All right, well, let's keep talking, people. I mean, let's keep attempting something at this. Oh, by the way, Jonathan Witt will be joining us just now to talk about this FTX thing, because he sent me a message. And the reason he's on today, Pums, is because when you and I are talking about Sam Bankman-Fried last week, he sent me a message after the show and said, no, you guys have got the bull by its tail here. You actually don't know what you're talking about. So I want to get him on to explain it to me, because he's also got a sense of humor about the whole thing. So
I need the acronyms unbundled.
Mm-hmm. SBF, FTX, FTT.
This morning.
We need to figure out what that's all about. So we'll get to him in a second.
This morning, getting ready to come to the show, and I just did a little quick catch up to see what's going on. And I was saying to somebody that it sounds exactly like when Enron was going down.
People are comparing it to Enron. In fact, I think the guy has been brought in to shepherd
Enron guy.
FTX out of this. Yeah. So I don't know if that's good or bad. We'll find out from Jonathan just now. Quick look at the headlines. We can't ignore the headlines for this morning, so let's have a look. South Africa's CPI figure has ticked up to 7.6%. That is a good number. The main contributors to the increase in the annual inflation rate included food and non-alcoholic beverages. So the consumer price index, which now sits at 7.6%, picked up slightly in the latest reading. October's reading ticked up from 7.5 to 7.6. The top statisticians released the data on Wednesday. They say the main contributors to the increase in the annual inflation rate included food and non-alcoholic beverages. I say it's a good thing because it's realistic. It's giving us an actual reading on the economy. It's obviously not good for consumers. It's not good for people who owe money. Dairy is among the food categories that recorded the highest levels of inflation, with milk, eggs, and cheese registering an annual increase of 10.5%. It's the highest rate since February in 2017. Stats SA
eggs
said
were already expensive.
Well, yeah, now you're going to pay even more for them. Stats SA, and not because of this report. This report is telling you what the market is doing. Stats SA said fuel inflation had contributed to decreases, adding that Lower petrol prices saw the fuel index decline. The annual inflation reading comes on the eve of the announcement of interest rates by the South African Reserve Bank, SARB. So we will have to see what happens there. They could increase the interest rates, and that would not make most South Africans very comfortable for very obvious reasons. But we can't pretend that things aren't more expensive either. That is not a good number. Are you on crack? Says Carl. I don't mean good. I really don't mean like good for the health of the economy. What I mean is it's honest. It is a reflection of what is going on in the South African economy and in the world. And I'm not thrilled about it either. But at least we know that they're not lying to us. Like when they said in the White House, what's her name? Karine Jean-Pierre, or what, KJP they call her. The White House spokesperson was saying, "Oh no, recession is not what you're seeing here with 2 periods of consecutive decline. That's not a recession. We're redefining recession. At least this tells us what's actually going on." So let's find out a little bit more about that later on. We may even discuss it in the Burning Platform. They want 6,000 community crime fighters for Gauteng, who must be fit, agile, and fearless. Yes, according to this is Panyaza Lesufi's ambitious safety plan. So they're on the hunt for 6,000 crime prevention wardens after pulling an earlier job advertisement that required applicants to obtain motivation letters from their ward councillors. The Gauteng Premier recently revealed his ambitious plan to tackle crime. He wants a face recognition camera on every street. That sounds Orwellian. Deploying a dedicated police vehicle to every ward. Again, who are these police people? If these were people who were really interested in community safety rather than being part of the problem, I'd say cool. And acquiring more than 500 drones for aerial surveillance. Again, I don't want Panyaza Lesufi flying his drones over everyone's house. Call me paranoid, but I don't think we need that. What do you make of this?
I just want them to get the little things right first. Before we have all of these ambitious plans of acquiring drones and who's going to fly all these drones, who's going to be monitoring all of these things. Before we get there, let's just get just the small basics. If I will be so impressed with Panyaza Lesufi and his gang, and if they just got the basics, just let's get the trash collected. Yeah. Let's get the potholes fixed. Let's get the let's just get the basics right. Let's get the basics right.
Before you start promising us all kinds of amazing
the easy
things.
Stuff. The easy stuff. Easy stuff. Let's just start there and solve the problems we do have that are I mean the and much has been said and written about the broken window policy in New York City, right? That's what this is about. It's about getting the broken windows fixed, the visible police, the trash off the side of the road, the street lights fixed. Like if we had lights, like the other day driving down Jan Smuts, let's just fix the street lights before you get us the drones. Before you get us the drones and the cameras and just fix the street lights. Let's see where we're going.
I mean, can you imagine waking up in the morning and hovering outside your bedroom window as you rub your eyes and start to take in what's going on around you is one of Panyaza Lesufi's drones looking into your room going, this person wakes up.
It'll crash into your window.
Oh God!
All right. Never happen. It's a lot like that. Our musing this morning about people taking tests before they vote. It'll never happen.
Never happen. All right. Well, let's get Jonathan Witt in here, not only to talk to us about FTX, but to talk about that as well. He corrected me the other day, and I always love it when Jonathan Witt, who listens to us reasonably often when he can. He's a busy doctor. He doesn't just sit around waiting to hear what's going on the Gareth Cliff show. But he listened to Phumi and I talking about
and
FTX.
He's been away.
Yeah, he's been all over the place. He's got, hey, haven't you Haven't you got an expanding family before our very eyes?
Wednesday next week.
Wednesday next week. Mazel tov. Another Wit comes into the world.
I'm adding a voter. Only one, though, Gareth. We should give one man one vote. This is not a lottery where you get extra ones for knowing some civics.
Oh, you don't like that idea at all.
Well, no, because think about how the worst people will use it. You're just creating a Democrat system in South Africa where Granny gets 7 votes harvested by the Democrats. So no, I don't like it at all.
Oh, I see. All right. Well, let's get to FTX and Sam Bankman-Fried, because there's a lot of nonsense out there about this. You said we got it wrong. Explain to me what happened here, because this is obviously devastating to crypto, but it's also all about this very, very ugly relationship, this corrupt relationship between politics and war and crypto.
Yeah, there's a lot going on here. And I don't think you got it completely wrong. I just think you had a bit of a normie view of it. And, the normie view is what happens when you read the Daily Maverick, for example, or the New York Times, and then don't source other news articles or any kind of other gathering, because the reality is that all of these publications tend to have some sort of bias. And the whole story is quite torrid and very weird, and resembles a few other stories which are equally weird. So FTX started in 2019, and within 2 years, Sam Bankman-Fried was one of the richest men in the world, being 30 years old, not dumb. He went to MIT, so he's not a stupid guy, but he also isn't the most intelligent guy by any means. If you look at what's being released now in terms of what the guy who's taken over to run FTX and to do the investigation has said, in terms of the fact that there was no accounting whatsoever. None. There was just no basic business accounting.
They were sending emojis.
Yes.
Yeah, they don't even know how many people were employed at FTX.
That's correct. There was no HR, there was no accounting, there was absolutely nothing. But he's the richest man in the world one of the richest men in the world, within 2 years, sitting on a stage with Tony Blair and Bill Clinton. In fact, on the 30th of November this year, he was scheduled to speak at a New York Times sponsored conference with Janet Yellen, who's head of the American Reserve Bank, with Volodymyr Zelensky, of course, who's everyone's favorite money launderer, and Mark Zuckerberg. So, this guy is in the biggest circles very quickly, and it's almost inexplicable. No one else has pretty much ever done that since a guy named Jeffrey Epstein, who obviously didn't kill himself. So we have like a very sort of weird situation going here.
It is explicable, as I understand it, because he's the second biggest donor to the Democrat Party in the United States. So when you make those kinds of donations to the Democrats, you get to be on stage with all the
but he didn't start like that, though. He didn't start like that. And when he's sitting on stage, he's certainly funding left-wing causes, and he's come out and said he wants to do this altruist giving
effective altruism
experiment, essentially effective altruism. Yeah. And so he's going to give all his money away, and most of the things he's giving his money to are left-wing causes. So, for example, you've seen the New York Times come out and defend this guy in the last 2 weeks and say things like, well, he was funding pandemic preparedness, and our pandemic preparedness won't be as funded, so we might all die from the next COVID. And this is really bad that Sam Bankman-Fried has now, had his millions, his billions taken away from him. It's inexplicable. So there's a few things leading up to this. So firstly, you've got this guy who's a virtual unknown until early 2019. His father and mother are both professors of law at Stanford, but both are very integral in the Democrat Party functioning. His mother especially. She's one of the largest fundraisers for the Democratic Party and has been for years. Then you've got
I just add that she recently wrote a thesis and has been delivering lectures on how personal responsibility is actually a very dumb idea, and we shouldn't have anything like personal responsibility and accountability and blame. She has a big problem with blame. She says people shouldn't be blamed. We should take collective responsibility, which is very that the ANC in this country would love to have her come here and give a round of lectures about how that is the best possible policy.
Sure. And unfortunately, that part of American politics has become very resemblant of Mao in terms of their thinking of the world. But and unfortunately, not enough people actually know who Mao was. But the that's the kind of parents he has, very connected, very sort of in with certain political types. And then his girlfriend, who, remember, you guys were talking about Alameda Research. So she ends up as the CEO of Alameda Research. He's the CEO of FTX. And Alameda Research is the sort of wing of FTX that takes all the money from FTX and then buys things with it, crypto-based things, other exchanges, etc. And she's in charge of that. Now, her father is a professor at MIT of economics, also politically connected, and he's the head of department and the current head of the Securities and Exchanges Commission in America, which is meant to investigate all of this and was meant to prevent this from happening in the first place. And before anyone says, but there's no rules around crypto, well, they've already prevented other crypto exchanges from doing certain things. They've already clamped down on certain altcoins. So it's not like they haven't done anything. There is already regulation in the United States around this, and there is already functioning from the SEC around this. That SEC head is the former junior to Caroline Ellison's father. And that same SEC is currently running the investigation into this guy and that girl, and basically has done nothing. This guy's sitting in the Bahamas and has not been arrested. No one can explain why. He's definitely stolen at least $2 billion and has defrauded people. And yet they haven't issued anything for it. They don't even want him back in the United States. They haven't asked him to come back. There's no extradition treaty, which they would happily get because the Bahamas has one with the United States. So that's inexplicable. And then the last aspect, or probably not the last aspect, but one other aspect of this, which is significant, is how money was moving from FTX into the Ukraine to allegedly fund war projects. And then that money was being moved back into the United States. And in fact, it looks like it's that money that funded Joe Biden's midterms.
Good God. I mean, this makes Zweli Mkhize and Digital Vibes look like really amateur, low-level stuff. And we're pissed off with Zweli Mkhize. This is really, really twisted and extremely corrupt I mean, if your descriptions are anything to go by, it should be the world's biggest controversy at the moment.
Well, it should be, and this is the question: is if it's just a straightforward young guy, smart guy manages to fool everyone, and let's be honest, that's not true. That doesn't really take place. You don't become a giant of industry to that level, and really one person. So we're not talking. This isn't like an Enron, which was a company that provided services. This guy didn't provide a service. He had a platform where you could buy crypto, and he created a token. That's what he did. You don't end up sitting next to every world leader and being in consultation with all the politicians and all the big wigs and being on the World Economic Forum's website as a major partner, which, by the way, they've scrubbed. You don't end up in that position within 2 years. If there isn't something else going on, and if there isn't something else going on, then why aren't you just arrested when it all comes tumbling down?
There's something else about this that bothers me. First of all, it is a way that politicians have been able to launder money, but it's also a way that they've been able to stick the knife into crypto, and they get both out of this deal.
Yes. So they've been wanting to regulate crypto for a long time, but they've firstly got no real reason to, because if you remember when crypto first exploded a few years back, the sort of propaganda that they tried to spread as the sort of corporate and government media was crypto is going to be used on the dark web so people can buy drugs and murder other people and human traffic. And that's why we need to stop crypto, because we can't track it, essentially. And that never really sold, because, well, crypto's been around a long time now. Most of the people you see walking around every day who are middle class probably own a little piece of crypto at some level. And it turns out they're not raping, murdering, human trafficking. They're just being normal people who might not want the government to know about their money, and might want a store of value somewhere else that isn't controlled by the state. And so, yeah, it's completely and now they get to say, well, look how bad this was. Crypto is the problem, but crypto wasn't the problem here. That's not the issue. And frankly, if you're buying a shitcoin called FTT on an exchange called FTX from a 30-year-old who can't comb his own hair, then the problem is not crypto. The problem might lie with you.
Pums, what do you make of all of that?
So, what do you think could have been done to prevent this descent? Because you sound like you've followed this whole thing through, and you're clearly very angry about it.
I'm not angry. I'm passionate about it. Whenever I come on the show, Phumi, just passion, not anger.
Okay, you're clearly very passionate about it. But what do you think could have been done to nip this in the bud, right? Or to not allow it to get to these levels?
That's a good question, and I suppose that points to the fact that they want legislation so they can nip it in the bud. The issue is how that legislation will come. Now, if that legislation comes from the side of how you advertise a token, for example, or proving value behind a token, having a decent white paper, as they call it, then that might be a reasonable way to approach such legislation. The problem is who decides that. But the issue is that they're going to want to regulate crypto to the point of controlling from the crypto side. And I think that's what's going to happen. In terms of how you prevent this from happening, if you're just an individual, if it looks too good to be true, it probably is. It's the same old adage. There really isn't much more to it. This guy was selling something that was completely unrealistic. Frankly, from my perspective, if you're looking at crypto and you want to buy into crypto in general, then you should be starting at Bitcoin and nothing else. Bitcoin is essentially the only true cryptocurrency. I'm not a complete adherent to that belief. I do believe in some of the others, but the reality is all the others have issues and can be manipulated. And for example, SBF made up the FTT token and then built in a back door into the system so that at any time he could just steal the money that people had invested or bought FTT with. Now that can't happen with Bitcoin, for example. It can't happen with Ethereum even. So those are the kinds of issues.
What do you think we're going to hear next week, Wednesday, when the congressional hearings start, when the Senate holds?
Yeah,
the first.
I mean that's interesting because the Congress, that committee, the Financial Services Committee, if I'm not mistaken, is led by a woman by the name of Maxine Waters. Some people might remember her as the woman who stood outside and told her supporters that they should harass Trump supporters wherever they find them in the streets and at gas stations, etc., across America. So she's a radical woman. Who obviously keeps getting voted in California because that place is a descending shithole. But she runs this committee, and she actually met with SBF a while back, and there's photos of her meeting with him at Capitol Hill and blowing him a kiss. In fact, very friendly with him. And had a great time meeting him. So she's going to be running the show. And so I'm not sure what will come of that. I think if you've looked at his explanations, some of which are quite funny in that they take apart a lot of narrative. So his explanations are that, it sort of all got ahead of him. This is all innocent. It got too big and he was investing in too many places, and that's why it became a Ponzi scheme, essentially. That's his explanation. So we'll obviously hear that. We're also going to hear about, I'm sure some people testify about how bad crypto is and unregulated and all that. But in addition to hearing all of that, he has spoken to journalists. I'm sure his lawyers are very angry with him, but he's had long conversations with journalists in the last few weeks. And one of those conversations said something like,
"Let him go."
Well, I
days
mean,
ago,
he's
he
had
was like,
multiple at this. He's had multiple lawyers at this point, and now his parents are sitting with him in the Bahamas, and they're both lawyers. So, but any lawyer would have told him don't say anything. But he's been DMing journalists on Twitter, and one of the things he said was he was asked, "Well, you know, you funded all these sort of green projects, and you were very keen on sort of Democrat kind of ideas, you know, progressive liberal ideas." And you seem to be woke. That was the one question asked of him, and he said, "Yeah, we just pretend to be woke because that's what makes us money, and that's what gets people to throw us influence." Which is really interesting because if you think about it, I'm pretty convinced that's what they're all doing.
Yeah,
They don't believe in any of those principles.
He's saying the quiet part out loud, which is not
Exactly.
allowed. So they're going to take him down
Yes.
for that as well. All right, listen, we're
Sure.
out of time. We've got to get you back on a burning platform soon. Lots of the comments here, people just want to hear more from you, but it's good to have you on, even if it is for a brief period, because I know how busy you are too. So thank you. Good to see you, Witt.
Cheers.
good luck next
Thank you.
week. Good luck next week with the
Yeah,
little Nungi.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for me.
Very
Cheers.
nice stuff. All right, good. More wits in the world is not a bad idea. Okay, so Phumelela, are you ready for the burning platform?
I am.
Okay,
It's
let's
going
do
to
it.
be a good one.
That's coming up next. Don't go anywhere, everybody. We've got the burning platform at 7 o'clock, which it already is, so shortly.
Welcome to the Third Draft Podcast, the show where we interview. Wait, do I start with who we are?
Catch the
We
show.
chat all about
Content creation.
content,
The business of content.
the business of content. Yeah, I
and
think
how
we can
much
take
money.
this one.
And how much. Yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
and then I'll
see-
be like, how much money or something. You
yes,
know,
yes,
you have
yes.
to
go-
keep it a bit
yes,
fine.
yes, yes. I'm Cynthia,
And I'm Mash.
and we are the host of the Third Draft Podcast. So catch fresh episodes every Wednesday on cliffcentral.com
On YouTube.
and on podcast, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or
Or
wherever you get your podcasts.
podcasts.
I like that. I like that. No, no, you do that. I like that. That's what we do. I love it.
This week on the Auto Trader podcast.
Now there's a problem where there's a lot of automotive companies, General Motors, VW, and all the VW's subsidiaries, so Lamborghini, Porsche, Audi, the works, are all considering leaving. In fact, 3 have already: General Motors, VW, the holdings company, and Stellantis, the holdings company, have all decided to pull out their ad spend. And now Twitter's at a point where basically all their money came from ad spend. So you're having these large companies pull out.
Catch us every Monday at 9 a.m. on YouTube and on autotrader.co.za.
And some change, people.
All right, it is time.
Oh,
What's going
yes,
on there?
Like,
Phumelela.
yeah, boy.
Oh, you there? Okay. We're going to be talking.
I am.
I'm just checking. I think you were already starting the conversation in the studio.
No,
But
not
that's
at
cool.
all. Not at all. We were just shooting the
Okay.
breeze.
All right. Well, we're going to introduce you to our guest in just a moment. It is time for us to check in on the burning platform for this week. Lots of things worthy of discussion. Popalatse, Chris Hani's killer Janusz Valus being granted parole, Cyril doing a state visit to the UK. Who is in the ANC's top 6 and who's in 9 for the top 6? And we got a bunch of other stuff to discuss as well. But first, let me introduce our guest, Lukhona Mnguni, who is a governance, politics, and development specialist. He currently serves as the head of policy and research at the Rivonia Circle, which, Pums, I know you've been trying to get someone from the Rivonia Circle on for a while. We've had, obviously, a while ago, we had Songezo Zibi on. But this morning, it is great to welcome Lukhona. How are you, Lukhona? Nice to see you.
Very good morning, and good morning to you, and good morning to your listeners. It's actually quite fantastic to join you. I must say, Pumela did drag me. Like, yeah, I've been looking for you guys for some time. Like, no, we are here. Now we are here.
All right. So tell us, just for those people who don't know at all, about the Rivonia Circle, so we can start there and you can just refresh our memories, because it has been a while
No,
since we
and
had
even
Songezo.
before, but I think I must say, I must defend myself and say,
Mhm.
I am not the person who dragged him, right? We had
Mhm.
one of the listeners put a message out on Twitter, and he said, we should get these people on. And I said, we've been trying. This is how. So now he feels dragged. I just want to say, I was just responding honestly to a listener friend.
All
Well, I
right,
mean,
so
we are
But
here.
it's
We are
over.
here
We're
now.
here now.
Those house rules.
So we're
were
here now, and it is water under the bridge. Tell us about the Rivonia Circle. You've got something interesting and exciting happening at the moment, even.
Yeah, I mean, look, we sought out to found the Rivonia Circle to be a political think tank that would close space that we felt existed in our political landscape. Political parties over time have alienated a lot of South Africans because generally about 93% to 94% of the voters are not even members of political parties. And so it means in
Mhm.
between elections, political parties spend so much time servicing their membership base, fighting and thugging it out on factional warfare and all of that. And the voters remain quite unserviced outside of the processes, which are always shoddy of public participation by municipal council, provincial legislatures, and parliament. And so what we thought
Mhm.
was missing in the political landscape was an overtly political think tank in its outlook, which does not, rely on doing research in an air-conditioned office, but would seek to go to communities and galvanize people back to democratic participation. And of course, we've been now, we are just about, what's the day today? Yeah, we're just about 11 months into the work of the Rivonia Circle. We officially launched in January 2022. We thought we were doing what we called a soft launch, and we are going to do a big launch in March. But the traction that just, came from that soft launch made it impossible for us to say we are going to launch again. People had given us the runway. And we've been doing, we'll get into the nitty gritties, but we've been doing work in communities. We've been to almost 40 communities now across 8 different provinces. And in those communities, we do programs like the Democracy Builder, political theater, and different convenings to get people's insights. And of course, we've done 2 surveys. You might have seen one of our surveys lately, which we did with Ipsos, 2,000 registered voters. We did 1,000 in December last year. We've done multiple focus groups. I think we're now on 26 focus groups. So we've been trying to understand the political landscape of South Africa and the politics of South Africans and what they are looking for going into the future.
So Gareth earlier in the show was musing about civic education and making people take a test. Maybe this is, you must engage here. Rivonia Circle can make those tests.
Well, we've got a different conception to civic education. We call it civic conversations because we felt that people sometimes, when they talk of civic education / voter education, it moves from the premise that, people don't know enough. Sure, they might not know enough about technical issues. What does Section 89 of the Constitution say? Therefore, the process to quote unquote impeach the president. But you've got to start where people are with the conversation about their own politics, their own conception of politics. There are so many things that have made people check out of politics, of governance. I mean, when we do the democracy builder, for example, we put out 4 words. We don't make presentations. Say, what does politics make you think of? And people say deal making, corruption, poverty, and all of that. So people are actually they have a view about what their politics are and the things they don't like about their politics. So it's quite fascinating to have that two-way conversation rather than going to educate them, because I think on the more technical aspects, all of us would probably fail one test or the other.
Well, yeah, and what an
Yes,
indictment
this is
on us.
exactly what Gareth said. So
Yeah, what an
Gareth, go.
indictment on us that is. I mean, that's really just the saddest thing, right, Phumi? Because it means that we want and expect so much from politics and from our political leaders, but we're not even prepared to learn about how the thing's meant to work. So I don't want to recover ground that we've already been over this morning, but I think that is something we've got to think about.
But so I'm very interested to know what, when you speak, when you have these conversations, what is the overwhelming response? So the number one, if you were to say, of all the communities we've been to, the number one thing that people associate with politics.
Inefficiency.
Wow.
Inefficiency. It manifests in different ways, but the core thing that's associated with politics right now by many people is inefficiency, whether that is expressed in terms of lack of service delivery, whether it's expressed in terms of people being left behind by the politicians, whether it's expressed as corruption, but at the heart of it is inefficiency. People really feel that politics have failed to be efficient and deliver on their promise. That's the one thing on the diagnostic. The overwhelming thing that's actually surprising, and that's why we've got a tag called the power to act, because when we ask people to come up with a project to solve for something in their community, they really think deep and sometimes don't solve for the obvious. Give you an example about a community in Sterkspruit in the Eastern Cape. When they were asked to solve for a problem, I mean, Sterkspruit, even though saying local municipality comes out quite well in terms of audits, it's actually a very poor municipality. It's in the top 30 in terms of good audits and so on, but it's a very poor municipality. And you would think people would solve for poverty and so on. They wanted to solve for the safety of people who belong to the LGBTQI plus community. And it was quite a wow factor. But when you then think about it, the discrimination of people because of their sexual orientation and so on actually is affecting families, because those people belong to families. When those people are killed, families feel the pain and the brunt of that. When those people are, discriminated and differentiated from the community and othered and all of that. So I'm trying to say, one of the things that has amazed us is how people are ready to be catalyzed to solutions. And they really do believe after that conversation that they've got the power to act, but they're not being given the space to demonstrate that power to act, because it would be a threat to some and certain politicians.
So we sit here in studios and in our news, in our dinner parties in Joburg and Cape Town and all of that, and we're deeply concerned about what is happening with the ANC and with the factional battles that they have, and leading up to their conference, we know all the people that are
in the running
and the numbers that they are likely to get and all of that. Do people in those outlying communities care? Do they care as much as we do about those political factions?
They care about their own lot. They care about their opportunities being stunted. They care about the difficulty to make it to those dinner tables that you talk about, and that they have completely been left out of the country's development. And the truth of it is that those of us who can afford to be on those dinner tables, sit in studios like this, we form part of a very minority privileged grouping. And this is why I've been saying for some time, and I mean, I've had this conversation with different colleagues, whether it's Sizwe Mpofu Walsh and others, and I said it when I spoke at Diaconia in Durban 5 years ago in the build-up to the ANC conference then. And I said, there's one thing that South Africans are just not preparing for. It's life beyond the ANC. I've been trying to highlight this for the last 5 to 7 years, that we actually have to start a very clear conversation. I asked one news editor and I said, what happens when the ANC no longer has 50%? How do you decide to deploy a reporter to the National Executive Committee meeting? Because it becomes a different and a new world. And I think sometimes, yes, because the ANC is governing, you can't avoid it. But I do think we overly obsess about, the machinations within the ANC. And in part, it's probably our own system shock of denialism that in actual fact, the ANC has disintegrated so much that it's become a danger and is harmful to society.
Yeah, there are a couple of key words which just make they immediately get my suspicions up when people use them. Like when people suddenly cite the LGBT community to make the discussion seem a lot more valid and relevant, or when people talk about the reporters in newsrooms, no one's really reading newspapers the way that they used to, especially not young people. It's such an irrelevant conversation to young people compared to the effect of social media, for example. And I often hear people talking about the interests of local communities, and I'm not saying this is for what you're saying at all. Lukhona, I get what you're trying to address here, and what the Rivonia Circle, I think, is going to do a very good job of, is making the real issues front and center. But I hear people paying lip service to all of these terms, and they don't really care about that stuff. No one's actually asking people in small communities what they care about. No one's asking them. No one's even interested in them. When last did you ever see an unemployed person sit down and get an interview? Because they're not stupid people. You're not stupid.
Yeah.
If you're unemployed, it's not because you're dumb. But instead, we'll sit and talk to Enoch Godongwana for an hour and a half on some special current affairs program on TV. But no one's sitting and interviewing a smart unemployed person about what they go through every day, what they'd like to see in the economy, why they've stopped voting. No one's paying attention to those people. They pay lip service to them and they claim to have their mandate. You even hear the unions sometimes saying, well, we speak on behalf of... No, you don't. You speak on behalf of the members who pay. And what you're doing is you're following and I'm cynical about this. I really am. I don't even I make no apologies for how cynical I am about it. These unions are just doing what they need to, the bare minimum they need to keep those member fees coming in so that they can keep investing in capitalist companies that they can pretend to hate on the other side of it, while making the leadership of unions extremely rich. It's just bullshit, and I hear about people going, oh, well, privilege this and privilege that. And they're exactly the same people who are so keen on getting themselves a little bit more of that privilege, just so they can use the word and make other people feel bad.
So, Gareth, you are raising something very important, because it's about the legitimacy of voices. And you are touching on something that over 10 years ago, I started, contending with. And, there's this term that as I grew in the academic space, people would say, these are the voices of the voiceless. And I said, but this thing is not true. Nobody's voiceless. You just choose not to give them a space to voice out. And we were really being trained to believe that, you are the voice of the voiceless. And I had to really ask, exactly as you say, where do I get the mandate to speak on behalf of the voiceless? I don't. What is that?
What a cheek for people who are in academic institutions, which means they're in the top 2% of people in this country, without even if you have student loans and you've got bursaries and you've got NSFAS or whatever it is, if you are in a university, you are among the luckiest and most privileged people in this country, just by virtue of the fact that your backside is sitting in a university lecture hall. And you can then have the temerity and the cheek to speak on behalf of poor people they've never come to the university and said, please, will you speak on our behalf because you've got a degree or two. It's outrageous that these academics have the kind of ability to cast their opinions around like they're more than just a spoiled little kid. And sometimes they're not spoiled, but they're going to be on their way to being way better off than most people in this country.
Yeah. Look, the upward mobility is going to be there. And it is important that we give people space to dream about their country. So I'm going to go back to the work that we do in the Democracy Builder program. There was one just yesterday in East London in a small community called Dukas. and another one today will be in Duncan. And 60 people pitched up, largely young people, at that democracy builder. There's a phase after we've put out the 4 words of politics, government, governance, and democracy. We then invite people. You should see the floor maps that we get to do with sticky notes. So we give people 3 sticky notes and say, what are the 3 things you would solve for given an opportunity in your community and in South Africa? And then we do bar graphs of the issues. And we take the top 3 most pertinent issues and priorities in that community of people. And we say, in South Africa 2.0, how do these issues look like? And to the point that you're saying, Gareth, I mean, just because somebody's unemployed doesn't mean that they don't have views and ideas. I was in one democracy builder in Alice in the Eastern Cape.
Or that they don't have skills. But just, can I stop you quickly, because we get to your Eastern Cape story now? What were the big issues? This is what you're actually doing the research. You're asking people. So what were the 3 biggest issues? Yeah, that they brought up in those 2.
So it largely depends on in the community that you find yourself in. For example, communities in the Western Cape, Philippi, Khayelitsha, where we've done democracy builders, their biggest issue is service delivery, sanitation, water, electricity. But then we group all of these into one column because generally they are service delivery issues. But it's unsurprising because the moment you drive into Philippi, you've got these portable toilets and people are squeezed together. So that is the immediate pressing need. But if you are in a community where, for example, like Alice, the biggest issue in Alice was education for people. It was not housing, because generally rural folks have land, they have some form of house. It might not be adequate, but they are not living in a shack.
There's formal housing in rural
There's formal
areas.
housing, right? So it's not their most pressing need. And there's connectivity of electricity as well in some villages. So then that removes them from the immediate front and center service delivery issues. So education became an issue. In a community in Vierplas in Gqeberha, their biggest issue was their local clinic, because it kept opening, closing, reopening, closing. And they said it's also unsafe. It has long queues. And guess what? That community said they would like us to assist them with becoming a clinic committee. And they've been trained by the Department of Health now. There's a clinic committee in that community because of the democracy builder work. It's not a clinic committee that is outsourced from somewhere and brought into the community. It's self-originating from the community. So for them, health was a serious issue because here they had an institution, but it was not functioning properly because they felt there's no oversight enough to do that. So I'm trying to say, Gareth and Phumi, it depends where you find yourself in terms of what the pressing issues. In Thohoyandou, their biggest problem was safety. And not surprising, one of the projects that came out of that democracy builder was a safety app. And this guy is about to team up with some big companies now to try and scale up and ramp up the impact and ability of that safety app. So I'm trying to say it's not just only about harvesting the issues, it's also about what are the kind of projects that come out of these democracy builders in communities, people finding solutions to their pressing problems.
Yeah, here's another problem. Nobody in the media is ever going to report on any of those issues you just talked about because they're boring and they're not clickbait. They would rather talk.
They're not Gwedemantashe shouting at Cyril.
Right, exactly. So this is what's irritating me. Is like the media has a responsibility in all of this, and I know you've got a show on ENCA, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so you and I've got this platform. Phumi and I share this platform every Friday. We've got a responsibility to also start talking about the things real people care about instead of going for the stuff that we think is going to get us clicks and views and viral marketing of ourselves on social media. This is a big problem, and I blame massive news sites. I blame the old news organizations, the newsrooms, the journalists themselves who've become whores for clickbait as well. You're not actually talking about the shit people care about. This is maybe a reflection on me because I'm boring. Who knows? I had a conversation with 2 of my clever friends the other day. I said, what is government for? This is the kind of conversation I have for fun. You know, when other people are drinking
Yeah.
and watching football, this is the kind of stupid shit I'm doing. So these two pretty intelligent friends of mine, we sat there for a little while, maybe no more than 20 minutes, talking about what the 3 top things that government should be doing are. We came up with just 3 things. You mentioned one already, service delivery. So this is something that both the people in Khayelitsha and Gugulethu and all those places in the Western Cape are most concerned with, and that people who are living in suburbia like me are concerned with. So we have that in common. Number 1 is service delivery. Number 2, we said, is maintaining and building and repairing infrastructure, as in government buildings, courthouses, you know, the electricity pipeline, roads,
Yeah.
the fuel pipelines, the trains, the harbors. So basically, infrastructure is number 2, which is hugely important. Those are 2 vital functions of government. That's why we pay taxes. It's why we have a government. And the third one is secure borders, because if you don't have secure borders, or you don't know what your borders are, or you don't have some means of getting in and out of the country legally, you're not a country. You don't have sovereignty. You might as well tear down the fences. And we say, well, you know, Zimbabwe has equal rights to tell us what should go on in Limpopo as we do. Why not? So I think those are 3 massive, massive things. And we get caught in the reeds sometimes around, you know, health and education. You know, people are pretty resilient, and the people at the bottom of the pyramid in this country are not relying on government for health, for example, because they can't. They're looking after themselves.
So
And they're
Gareth,
setting
you're
up,
raising
they're doing things like clinics. Yes,
you're
Pumps?
raising an interesting thing, which is what I pick up from what you're saying, Lukhona. So when you've had these engagements, self-organizing within the communities is then very important. So the power to act, the power to be in control and take on the solution or providing the solution from. But how are they supported? How do the communities then get further support? Because sometimes in some communities, I mean, if I think about the rural communities where I have ties, is they may not know what it is to run a health committee or a health or a safety app. You know, so how can we support them, or how do you support them, if at all?
Well, so we conceive of these projects as 6-week projects. We don't, I mean, it's resources to sustain some of
course.
these. But what we've actually found is that there are 2 big needs that people need support with. One is mobility. So if you can give them transport money to be able to move from their village to the nearest town, to knock at a particular door to get certain things done, partly because transportation costs have just become so astronomical. I mean, I did research in KZN in 2019 where we interviewed 1,000 people from rural towns across KwaZulu-Natal. And one of the things that came out was, I mean, there was a village where it cost about 70 rands or 90 rands from that village to the nearest town. And some people are just completely squeezed out and they don't have the finances for that kind of mobility. So one is to provide mobility. The second is to tap into technology. People have cell phones, so giving them airtime, data, and so on to organize things and organize themselves. That is also very important. Because sometimes I think when we think of support, we think big ideas. I can tell you, we've not seeded any of the projects in the different communities at over 7,000 rands. And they've been seen to completion by people, because people then do what we were taught, at least when I was still a community development student. You know, we spoke a lot about asset-based community development, to say that development should start within galvanizing the assets that are within the community. Give you a story about Mahikeng. They wanted to solve for, you know, the issue of lack of income. And they didn't try and build a chicken run. They just went to a lady who has a chicken farm, but has a chicken run building that she was not using. And they simply asked if they could use that and utilize it for their own ends. Those guys are now selling eggs. They call them Rivonia Circle eggs. But the point I'm trying to show is that there are assets within our communities, and we need to think carefully. I mean, Gareth is talking about what government should do to catalyze development, service delivery, infrastructure, you know, secure the borders. So you also have to ask, what are the things you can do in a community to catalyze the power to act. And I think, questions around supporting mobility and
I'm
accessibility, it's those two
just
things. They are
just
very
quickly,
important.
comrade, on a point of order, I was actually just saying this is what government is for. I'm not saying this is
Yes,
what they should do. Like, this is the whole reason we bothered to have one. Otherwise, we would just devolve into small anarchic kind of city states or
of
whatever.
course.
And in most of the country, that is the way that it's running anyway. Most of South Africa is not run by the national government, whether they like to believe it or not. There are parts of
They don't
rural
even care about
KwaZulu-Natal.
leaving it.
No, they don't give a shit.
They don't
Northern Cape, KwaZulu-Natal, Northwest Province, parts of Limpopo and Mpumalanga, certainly parts of the Free State that have devolved into small fiefdoms
Yeah.
that are
I mean,
either run by a gangster in chief or by the community themselves, where they're fixing their
Yeah.
own water
like
pipes.
Harry
they're
Smith.
digging-
Yeah.
Correct. So we already know what this is. So when people go to the polls or don't, the central question is, why do we need a government? And that's why I asked that question about what are the 3 top things that government is there for? Because if we figure that out, we can also figure out, all right, well, what can we do without them? And what should we be doing for ourselves and making it sustainable so that kids will be given opportunities to learn in education institutions, where people will be allowed opportunities to work, to make a meaningful contribution to society. And those are the kinds of things that become the big questions. I don't think we need politicians to solve those things for us. We must figure them out ourselves in think tanks and civil institutions like Phumi and you and I are talking about.
They must hand over the budget, though. I mean, that over a trillion rand
Well,
budget
They will never.
would come in handy in the hands of the people.
You will have to pry it from their cold dead hands. They
Yeah.
will never hand it over. You will have to pry it from their.
It's the thing that they want. I spoke to one veteran in the ANC ecosystem, and
Ecosystem.
he said he's
Sorry, we need a moment. Say that again. In the ANC
ecosystem.
ecosystem. Okay,
Yeah,
all right.
it's quite an ecosystem that works in different ways. So I said, so we're contending about this, how much money, parties spend on elections now. He says, if it's 1 billion, think about it. You can spend 1 billion to buy access to 5 trillion rands over a term.
Yeah.
And it's okay. And we don't see where this money goes. I mean, Brutus Malada wrote a piece last week in the Daily Maverick, and he spoke about, the Gauteng problem for 2024 and how it's going to be tightly contested because there's 460 billion rands at stake that people want to control. This is a very big province. But to the point that Gareth you are making, I do want to push back a little though and say we do need to get to a point of our despondency with politics and politicians and political parties must not result in us giving up hope in the political system as a concept, because what it's going to do is it's going to leave the worst of the worst in that landscape, and we will still be paying our taxes. We're not going to check out on paying our taxes. We will still be paying our rates. We'll still be giving them the revenue in their hands on a silver platter to misuse and abuse. But we've got to figure out these multiple ways of attack. And I think, as you have been saying, in certain places, go to Maluti Apufong. I mean, the ANC there did a mess of it. Councillors just wanted to get rid of a corrupt mayor of their party, and the party decided to get rid of the councillors. And of course, now those councillors contested as MAP 16 in the 2021 elections, and they're now governing through a coalition in that municipality with that collective of people who have been fixing things and so on. So I do think that there is still a need to battle and fight for the kind of people that we deserve to occupy political office. Because as both of you may know, I have said to some people, I've never seen a society that develops where the political elite and establishment is pulling one direction and the citizens are pulling another direction. Mampela Rampela in the Dr. Mampela Rampela in the scenarios, Dinokeng scenarios, they called it this thing of moving apart scenario. If there's a moving apart situation, unfortunately, there's not going to be a coherent and cohesive development. In our own little fiefdoms, as you call them, we may feel that we are okay. We are fairly fine. But what about the solidarity of citizens and building a country? That you start losing that, and then you end up with no country at all. Like, I mean, countries like the Democratic Republic of Congo, they are not countries. They've got borders, but I mean, if you look at what is happening inside that country, I mean, Greg Mills and David Hepst have written quite interestingly on this. This is not a country. You can't say you have a country where you've had peacekeepers for over 50 years.
But also, you see there are people all over the world running away from that country because it is not a country.
Yes, it can't afford them anything. And we're starting to see people running away from this country, South Africa.
Correct.
Go to London. Go to London. It's now easier to bump into a South African than it was 6 years ago in London. Literally, on the on the tube, on the bus, you can just tell. This one. Sometimes there are these baba with their hair and beard from KZN mostly. I was in London in September. I said, this one. He's right. This one is from South Africa. I'll just say Sawubona and he responds. But
and
it's not very easy.
And it's not as if those people who are going over to London are the people that we can afford to lose. Again, everybody deserves their place under the sun. But my God, we need engineers, we need doctors, we need people who can make things happen, and entrepreneurs. Why should we lose all of our most talented people to these other countries because the government can't do its job properly to keep them here?
And understand that those talented people, we had Kaya Sitole here telling us about a grouping that he is also, now you could bump into him on the metro over there in London, right? About a grouping of young Black chartered accountants that they have now formulated over there in London. And this is the thing. So you've also got to get it around your brain that the people we are losing are not a particular type of person. It is every type of person that we need to run and build our country.
No, you're quite correct. I mean, yesterday I bumped into Lozen Naidu on the How Trade and we spoke about this. Says he was in London. Kaya Stole just put on a random Saturday a group of 8 people, all Black professionals, architects, accountants, as Gareth is saying, engineers, and they were watching cricket, they were having drinks, and people are living the best of their lives. We are also losing some people to the companies that are beginning to establish their headquarters in Dubai. So there's quite a huge channel of people. And as you are saying, it's no longer a grouping. It's no longer a racial group thing. It used to be like
age,
white people, old white people are going. People in their late 20s, early 30s are believing that their career prospects don't lie and reside in this country. They are better off flighting and going elsewhere. And I saw something very weird on this issue on Twitter. There was a week where these people who have left were literally running threads about how comfortable they are and how to live. They were saying, no, now I've got state health care. I don't have to worry. When I pay my tax, I know that my child is going to have transport. In actual fact, if you get pregnant here, and this is more around the Nordic countries in Europe, you'll get a stipend of some sorts
for 6 months.
For 6 months and so on. And it was like they were recruiting. I'm like, no. What have we become if our own people are starting to speak like that?
You just see all those recruitment ads that are coming from all kinds of countries now when you go online. And they know that South Africans work hard and South Africans are prepared to drop everything and go. So they're advertising to us and they can pick up real talent very quickly and cheap. So
somebody said they are denouncing. Somebody said they are now renouncing their South African passport.
Of course.
Take up citizenship that side and it's fine.
If you're young and you haven't really established deep roots here and you don't see much of a prospect, why the hell wouldn't you is the question. And instead of Cyril, who's also in London at the moment, going over there to wine and dine with the new king, which I suppose
be carried on a carriage, somebody.
Well, I mean, have you seen those? Listen, first of all, that's all good. That's what the Brits do when someone comes to visit. It's fine. I'm glad that Cyril was the first official state visit for King Charles III. Whoop-de-doo. But he is doing all of that stuff, which of course has its role. And there's something about that kind of summit international diplomacy crap that we kind of have to keep paying heed to, because there are occasionally important things that happen in those discussions. But by and large, what did you make of his visit? What would you like to see come from things like that in the future? Because it does cost us money to send Cyril and the delegation that he took with him to fancy state dinners and
Has the
diplomatic
presidency
reception.
tweeted yet? Has the presidency tweeted about what they're doing over there?
I don't know. I'd love to know what are our victory conditions for going to something like that. I'd love to just see, okay, well, we've got to establish these kinds of trade deals. Let's work on, some process whereby they can help us to generate more power, or whatever it might be. There's skills that maybe we should come to
As
some
if there's a
arrangement
health
over
partnership
the
that they've
South
agreed to.
Africans who live. Maybe the South Africans who live there should be paying less tax here if they're working over there. There must be some incentive structure that makes it worth us sending Cyril there. What do we want from it?
No, I hear you, Gareth. And I mean, look, I am never optimistic about those type of pomp and ceremony, banquets, because generally I don't think that they are intended to yield much result. Part of diplomatic work is just a show of force. It's just a show of friendship. It's King Charles III saying, "I've got the ability to choose who's my first, guest, and I want South Africa." We are always first in line for some odd reason or the other. Even when former President Zuma came into office, the Queen quickly said, "Come, Sholozi, join me." There was nothing that was going to come, but you're quite correct to say in the working meetings, because then you have some parallel sessions amongst ministers and so on. In the working sessions, there should be things that we are able to leverage on, like you are saying, Phumi, a health partnership. The NHS, with all its faults and all its problems of being underfunded that politicians in the UK fight about, not enough doctors in hospitals and so on, the NHS works. And because I came from a Commonwealth, when I stayed in Edinburgh, I was on the NHS. I could go and get, when I was going to travel to Kenya from Scotland, I went and got my hepatitis tests done for free. You'd never do a test like that here in South Africa for free. So we've got to be able to say, do we have the kind of serious politicians, legislators, and bureaucrats who really mean it when they strike these deals? Because if we were to go to the depository of all these bilateral and multilateral agreements, you'd probably find some very interesting things that have been signed into agreement, have been, envisaged into the future as partnerships. The UK is extremely vulnerable now in terms of its exit from the European Union. I mean, if you've been there in recent times, people are really contending with the issue of inflation. Energy prices were almost going off the roof, and something had to be done about them. Liz Truss, one of the first things that she did when she got into office was that mega £100 billion energy deal, which backfired. But she had no choice but to do it, because you were starting to have households saying that the projection is that we may be paying £6,500 per household on average for energy in the next 6-8 months. So they are vulnerable. There are places where we need to plug in holes in those economies. We must not see ourselves only as recipients from these economies. And I think the framing for me, even in the Just Energy Transition, investment program that the president has been championing, is to conceive of us as just mere recipients. Of course, we've got our blackouts and so on, but we've got to also think of how do we fill the gaps. I mean, I was in a conference at the Vatican a few years ago, and one academic protested. It was part of the Pontifical Academy of Social Sciences, and one academic from Italy said, "But why are we speaking about a youth we don't have?" And I thought, here is an opportunity. Africa has a demographic dividend. You just need to make sure that the young people are given opportunities, education, skills, and training. And it's not just the 2% that we were talking about that is in universities, but we give them the skills in, vocational studies and so on. And suddenly you've got programs of sending some of our young people to go and fill up spaces, because we're not going to avoid the issue of migration, but how can you do it in a coordinated effort, in a way that, it's about making sure that people are not living because conditions are difficult in their countries, but they're actually living because they've got something to offer to the world. Japan ran out of truck drivers at some point, and it was a big crisis for the construction industry and the logistics and moving of goods industry. But how are we taking care of those opportunities? Because the Chinese are taking care of opportunities that are in our economy. People from India are taking care of opportunities in the ICT fields and in the diamonds polishing space that are in our country. You name it, all kinds of, some of the big restaurants here in Johannesburg are not owned by South Africans. They are owned by people from Portugal, people from, your different countries in Europe. So, but what are we doing? What is our agenda to the world rather than, the world
What's
to
the
us?
world
And that's what I would
agenda
like
to
to
us?
see, Gareth, in those kind
But
of visits.
I also hear you
Bums?
talk about kind of determined bureaucrats that know what is out there. This is one of the issues that we have in our country, is really in that bureaucratic space, not just people who have been deployed. There's much has been done about deployed by a particular party into a space, which is also one of the things that going into 2024 with much talk about coalitions is a very big worry that we have, is are the bureaucrats that we have in our system able to continue working no matter what the political turmoil may look like? Because we don't see that, right? So here in Johannesburg, we have got a coalition government in place that is very fraught with many things. I see Mpopalati is facing yet another motion of no confidence. Meanwhile, the rubbish is not getting collected, like the work is not getting done, because those individuals who are the bureaucrats who should keep the work running don't do that either. So
this is an important thing, and I said to somebody yesterday, it's part of this denialism that South Africans tend to go through. That's why we've always been conditioned. No, it's not a crisis, but we can all see there's a crisis. We are refusing to come up with a piece of legislation that, one, will deal with how coalition governments are, constructed. Begin one. Secondly, with the possibility of a national election, for example, with the ANC dropping below 50% in 2024, the problem even becomes more difficult. And one, the first is that you don't have enough time to try and put up these coalition arrangements. And then it leads to the scavenging thing. But we also have not come up with ways, and the National School of Governance, they talk about it as professionalization of the public sector. And I say to them,
Busani is like you. He's also been trying not to come here.
Yeah, you must bring him here and ban him, because I say to Busani, look, Busani, you can give DGs, for example, directors general, you can give them 10-year contracts. The high turnover and the insecurity of tenure of directors general is not because of how many years they have on their contracts. It's because of the type of politicians who are always trying to interfere with the bureaucracy of their departments, and then they chuck out DGs, or a person arrives at a department, they have a personality clash with a person, and they ask that they be transferred to a different department. So the high turnover of DGs in government is not because their contracts are either 5 years or 10 years. It's because we have not come up with a formula that insulates to a degree our bureaucracy for it to be able to continue to work even with the political machinations. Now, there has been an instability of a bureaucracy without a coalition government at national, right? And I think it will probably worsen with a coalition government if we don't put parameters in place to ensure that the power of politicians, this is where it begins and this is where it ends. They will always tell you, no, we are there to provide strategic political leadership and guide the policy direction of the department. But behind the scenes, they are pressuring DGs, they are pressuring DDGs to make deals on their behalves, to appoint service providers that they want. And maybe what we also don't have is a platform where DGs can go when they are aggrieved with their bosses. You saw the fight between Dr. Blade Nzimande and Gwebs Konde when Gwebs was left with like 2 months of his contract. But Nzimande was adamant he's going to suspend him. He wants him fired. Gwebs went to court, and then Nzimande said he's firing him because of the National Skills Fund audit outcome by the Auditor General. But guess who doesn't want to release the report, the investigative report on the National Skills Fund? It's plain Nzimande. So who was actually the problem around the National Skills Fund issue? So we've got to ask these questions and then use the case studies to say there's clearly something rotten here in the sharing of power between the political establishment and the bureaucrats. And we've got to go to other countries and see, how that, division is achieved, division of responsibilities, divisions of roles. Yes, there will always be interference. Politicians by nature always want to feel that they've got the final say, they've got the power, they exercise it, you feel it. But as we move towards a possibility of coalitions, some people are now asking, in actual fact, I was responding to an email on my way here because someone was saying, what of directly electing the president? And I said, well, the Zondo Commission report has made this proposal. Many people fear it for a number of reasons because of how our country is, inequality, and that it could end up being a contest of billionaires and people who have money. But theoretically, what it could do is help us not be swallowed by these coalition arrangements. Imagine if you changed presidents as much as the cities of Tshwane and of Johannesburg have changed mayors. Presidents have lifetime salaries. Presidents have lifetime security. You would suddenly now be stuck with 10 former presidents, and maybe because of the deal making and the shenanigans of politicians, they could just say, hey guys, we will give each other this thing in rotation. 1 year it will be you, 1 year it will be you, 1 year it will be... Nothing is beyond politicians. But if you directly elected the president, what you would do if you directly elected the president, you would have to remove Section 102 of the Constitution, which is the motion of no confidence, because Parliament can't lose confidence on a person that they did not elect, right? And you would keep Section 89, which is our version of an impeachment clause, because Section 89 has a far higher threshold. 2/3 of Parliament must vote in favor of removing the president rather than 50% plus one. So you've got to start thinking about these governance issues in anticipation of mischief politically, because we have seen it. And there's no reason to believe that at a national level, the political mischief that prevails in local government will not be there.
So, which brings us maybe for the last little bit to a really an ongoing discussion, but one that the Rivonia Circle is actively involved in, and it's in direct representation and changing the electoral.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
That one. Look, I mean, I think they now agree. I think the ANC, again, I'll use that word for your entertainment, Phumi. The ANC ecosystem now agrees that it has been wrong on this issue. They've also been lambasted by former presidents of the ANC. Former President Mbeki, 2 weeks ago in the Sunday Times, there was a massive column of an interview with former President Kgalema Motlanthe. And because they know that the current arrangement was transitional in nature, because of where we were in 1993, to create a democratic breakthrough moment, you needed to make sure that there is much possibility for everybody to be represented, one, in parliament, and partly because parties generally were quite insular in terms of their interests. You had the Mangopes who were interested in their, carrying on their legacy from the Bantustan. You had your minority France for Indian people. So you needed to create a system that would make it possible for, one, everybody to want to participate, but also feel that they had an opportunity for representation in parliament. And then when the clause for the government of national unity was put in place, it was not a coalition government. The ANC had over 50%. But again, it was to say there has to be a degree of collaboration because of where we are coming from. And any party that had, I think, over 10 seats in parliament could be part of the government of national unity. And the NNP was there, the IFP was there, and so on. Now, however, there was a commitment to say we would have to envisage, one, a truly representative electoral system. Secondly, an accountable electoral system, and thirdly, a localized electoral system that is closest to the people. Now, the fact that they sometimes use the argument that says, yeah, but people don't even know who their ward councillors, who their ward councillors are, is neither here nor there. Doesn't matter whether I know who my ward councillor is. The fact that if I do want to find them, I would know exactly who represents my constituency. If I do need to find them, if I do need to talk to them, don't always have to talk to them, right? But now, what is at stake is not the inclusion of independent candidates. What they are running away from is that we are about to crack open the closed party lists. Because a party can say, this is our 200 MPs going to the election, and you think, brilliant people. And then they get their seats, and now they have to deploy, and they say, oh, no, these people are not available. Now, these are going to be your parliamentarians. Now, I'll give you an example in my town, a small town of Flagstaff in the Eastern Cape. They are also my relatives, the Kappas. They are both members of parliament, right? The husband was on the regional to national list, Eastern Cape to national, and the wife, Deputy Minister Zoleka Chapa, was on the national to national list. Now, suddenly, the ANC has to make a choice between the two. Who's going to stand for them in that constituency? It's now no longer automatic that both husband and wife can go and be representatives in parliament. They must make a choice. So partly why there is resistance to the electoral reform agenda is because it's going to present some political parties with headaches. They know that, I can imagine Faith Mutambi trying to win her constituency in Limpopo to send her to parliament. I don't think she would get it, but she's chairperson of her portfolio committee now. She's secured. So once you start creating that competitiveness in the elections, unfortunately, some people are going to lose out. Some are not even known in their communities. Cyril would have to make a choice whether he resides in Shiawelo or Hyde Park, and whether he can win if he was to represent a community around Hyde Park. He doesn't live in an ANC ward, right? So these are the current problems that people are grappling with, because it becomes a point of vulnerability. Because what if I can't win the constituencies? And as we have been seeing with local government elections, once you introduce a direct election constituency system, you also make competitive the proportional representation list. So you've had parties like the EFF, for example, represented in the city of Johannesburg without even winning a ward, but they've got councillors in council. So this idea that small parties would die is also false. It's also false. They say, no, we keep the proportional representation because small parties will die. Rubbish. There's direct representation in the city of eThekwini. There are 18 parties. They have 23 seats amongst themselves. So small parties don't die simply because you change the electoral system. What you make complex, though, in national elections is because of the viability of national elections, the prestige of national elections. There are now people who are not in politics who would suddenly want to contest in their constituencies. Maybe a Thuli Madonsela could say, my parting shot to South Africa is to just represent a constituency in parliament, and I will be a legislator and make sure that the laws of the country are to the competence that we require them. Now, suddenly, some mediocre politician has to be toe-to-toe with a Thuli Madonsela, and you increase the competitiveness of the system. And that's what the ANC in particular does not want.
And they're dragging their
including their fellow travelers, the PAC, EFF, and Al Jama.
Boom. Do you want a mic
Gareth,
to
you are
drop?
mute.
Do you want a mic to drop?
Boom.
I can't think of a better way to end this, actually. I've got to say, Lukhona, such a pleasure to have not only the refreshing ideas that you've brought, we have not discussed, and we've been doing the Burning Platform for years now, but the one thing we haven't got to discussing is some of the stuff that you've just brought up now about competent legislative politicians who are elected in independent roles, but also the idea of having a president who's directly elected, which we haven't ever discussed before. Reforming the systems that don't work. I love this stuff. You've really made me think. There are plenty of comments from people who I haven't even been able to put up on screen, just agreeing with you, wanting to hear more from you. This is the work of the Rivonia Circle, and you can find out more from Lukhona and his other and his other friends at the Rivonia Circle, some of whom we hope to have join us again soon. But you have been a real winner this morning, so thank you for coming in and being part of the show.
Thank you for the candid conversation and reflections, Gareth and Phumi. I really enjoyed it, interrogating some of our assumptions, some of the work that we do, but also
Sure.
just giving us an opportunity to share some ideas. And I do think, Gareth, that the greatest work that we've got to do going forward is to really think carefully about the kind of state reforms that we need that may put us on a different course and journey as a country. So thank you so much for this morning.
See, it doesn't
I love
always
it.
have to be in the DMs that you get people out.
Yes,
Sometimes it's on the street.
and I must say that K Kwanele KZ has already come and said, I dragged you and not Phumi, so Phumi, you're protected.
All right. Thank you, everybody, and have an excellent
Thank you so
Thursday.
much.
We will join
Have a
you
lovely
again.
day.
Thank you, Lukhona. And we will see you again next Thursday for the Burning Platform. And in the meantime, don't forget that we're on tomorrow morning, bright and early at 6 a.m. right here on cliffcentral.com.